So welcome everybody to Wisdom's UK Chats, 8 o'clock in the morning UK, 10 o'clock in South Africa, and but I think we've got the same weather. Although you may be cooler, it just feels cooler to South Africans because we have a sort of dull day. Yeah, so we're diving in today to talk about what are you prepared to take the heat for? And it came from, I can't remember, I think it was Trevor from last week said, you know, what would you stick your neck above the parapet? You know, it was this lovely medieval image of this castle and somebody's head being, you know, sticking out and being prepared to take the arrows. And so it led to this idea of, you know, what would you be prepared to stick your neck out for? What would you be prepared to take the heat for? And so there are a couple of things that I thought of, but I don't want to preempt any of the discussion. So Edward, that means I'm going to come straight to you. So what are you prepared to take the heat for?
Do you know what? When you first set the topic, I thought, oh, this will be really easy. I'll have loads and loads and loads of examples. And you know what? I can't think of any. And I think of myself as someone that's prepared to stand up, prepared to stick out. And perhaps it's because I've got a flak jacket. You know, a flak jacket's a camouflage jacket that's also bulletproof. And I think now, if I do get flak, I don't notice it. You know, it just bounces off me. But I mean, I remember quite some time ago, and one thing that's sort of important to me is to be true to my beliefs. And in about, I think it was 2001, I was in Durban for the comrades, obviously, and someone I met said, "Oh, we're going out to a meal tonight. Do you want to come with us?" And I said, "Okay." Yeah, I didn't really know this guy. I just met him briefly, and then all his friends were in the restaurant, and I was sitting between these two huge Afrikaans guys. You know, if they'd lost a bit of weight because they're a bit tubby, they could have been the sort of second row for South Africa. They're that big. And I'm sitting there between them, you know. And it's roughly the time when hotels were starting to put vegetarian options on the menu. And these two Afrikaans guys were going on about it and how a real man needs meat and all that. And none of this mamby-pamby, tree-hugging vegetarian stuff. And so I just sat there and said, "Oh, you know what? I'm really proud to be a tree hugger. I'm really glad we got this stuff on the menu. I'm going to order this." And, you know, it was important to me to stand up then and to make a stand. And it totally deflated them because someone was prepared to stand up to them. I had checked which was the fastest way to run out of the restaurant, mind you, before I said it. And so I think that's why I don't really take flak, because I don't care if I take the flak. It's not going to harm me. But there are things it's important for me to stand up for. If I see things that I think are wrong, I think it's my duty, my place to stand up, and particularly for people that perhaps don't feel they can stand up for themselves. You know, racism is one thing, sexism is another thing, bullying is another thing I stand up for. Yeah, but I don't take flak because I just don't accept it. I am who I am. I'm going to say what I say, and that's it. You know, Trevor likes to throw his odd barb my way. It just bounces off, no problem at all. Yeah, so that's. I thought I had lots to say, but I don't, because it doesn't bother me.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
And that's
sorry.
such a great, sorry, Ivan, I was interrupting. You go ahead. You guiding.
No, I was just going to carry on, but go for it.
I was just thinking about our conversation last week about criticism and how, you know, this just follows on from that. And that if you are going to stand up for something, then does it really matter what others say? So Sven, what are your feelings? What do you, I'm saying, you know, what are you prepared to take the heat for, to stand up for, no matter what the consequences?
Similar to Edward, is one of those questions where you think, oh, that's easy, you know, let's go for the next week, and then you said, oh, not that easy, not story-wise at least. But I mean, I said yesterday, just on the back of the criticism, or no, last week on the back of the criticism, that you know, for me, standing for my values, that was always the frustrating part for me, to actually naturally stand for something, to explore things, to see things that could be changed, to see things that could be done differently or better, or in business, for instance. And it was, you know, then getting this whole thing back of like, oh, you have to learn about the history of the company first. You have to do this first. You have to do that first. And no, this is how we do it here, and things like this. And there was something natural inside me to just push those boundaries. And I think now that I know what the core value is that was behind it, with my curiosity, it's quite interesting, because ever since I've actually named that value as a name, I'm even more proactive in doing so. and to actually stand up for it and say, like, you know what, I am curious, and for me, this is an important thing to push the boundaries. For me, it's an important thing to just go behind the status quo and actually say something about it. And I'm going to do it, because that's who I am. That's just very simple. So I stick my head out, and I know almost for a fact that will that there will be some heat by doing so. But actually, because I do, I can help make the world a better place. You know, and I think that is what I want to stand my head up for, is like, if I can contribute to make the world a better place, then let's do it, you know, or let me do it. As far as it's my responsibility, it's my part, then I want to do it. I want to stand up for it. And that, yeah, that means to take the heat to start with, but let's do it, because it's the right thing to do. And in that sense, it's a similar thing that Edward said, you know, if it's the right thing to do, then, you know, if we're convinced of that strong enough, then I think that is what empowers us to stick our heads up. And that's such an important thing that we do. You know, of course, there are limits in some sense of how we do that. So that's another thing I had to learn, is I don't have to stick my head up and then just doing it for the sake of being to suffer, for the sake of being hit, and for the sake of getting the heat. There is probably a wiser way to try to win people over. But there are places where that's not necessarily possible until you have actually, you know, shown people that there is a different way. And I think that is where I find myself in often. I see myself like as somebody who's always pioneering. You know, I'm really underneath, like in the invisible part, pioneering, actually laying a foundation, and somebody else can build on top of that. And I found myself many times seeing my thinking in an area, and I say something, and something like, this is complete nonsense, you know, and then 3 years later people stand up and say, like, oh yeah, I could see this. And you think, like, yeah, but I helped lay the foundation for that by just simply seeing it far longer, and having discussions with people, you know. So that's kind of my take on sticking your head up, you know. It's like, yeah, let's do it. If it's the right thing to do, definitely do it. Go ahead. But, you know, it's always good to think for yourself is, are you starting a war for the sake of having a war? Or are you actually starting the fight to actually make a good thought through change? And that's probably an important differentiator in sticking up your head.
Yeah, I think that's really wise words, Sven, that, you know, I think I love the fact you're linking with Edward, you know, being true to yourself, being true to your values, making a difference, but at the same time, you know, not picking a fight for the sake of it. And I think that's a wise word. Ivan, what are your thoughts?
I think as Ed and Sven have said, you know, it's as you start to think about it, it's perhaps not as easy a topic as one might have thought. Yeah, I must admit, I've never been one particularly to stick my head out. I'm pretty much an introvert, and you know, I'd rather, in some cases, and then maybe it's the difference between, you know, simply avoiding conflict and standing up for a cause. So I think there are two different elements there. So, you know, there are times when I'll just simply turn my back and walk away because it's just not worth it. As Sven says, you know, is there any point in actually starting a war? And in some cases, it's just simply not worth the effort. You know, you can see the direction the other party's taking, and you can see the attitude that they have, and doesn't add any value to actually engage. So, you know, and where there are other people that I've come across that will immediately engage. You know, as soon as their hackles rise, they get stuck into the fight, and often it's a no-win situation. So, you know, it's a bit of a different take on the topic, I suppose. But if you're really talking about what are you prepared to take the heat for, then I think it's got to come down to your values. You know, if something is in direct conflict with your most deeply held values, then you've got to be prepared to stand up and you know, defend that position, because otherwise they're not really your values, are they? Because, you know, if you know, always remember someone said to me, you know, your truest values are things that you're actually prepared to die for. So, you know, if you're going to defend them to that point, then they are real values. If you're not, you've got to question, are they your values? You know, they might be your interests or your desires or your superficial beliefs and things like that, but are they truly values? So, yeah, you know, don't attack my family. You know, someone does that, you know, they're going to have me in their face without a shadow of doubt. You know, it's one of those things, you know. So you've got to look at that. You know, integrity, I think, is another for me. You know, you want to attack my integrity, you know, I'm going to be in your face like you can't believe, you know. And I said in one of our other sessions, you know, that actually back in 2003 gave me cause to dismantle a group of companies that I was chairman of. Somebody questioned my integrity and my trustworthiness, and I said, well, if that's the case, these businesses no longer exist, and I dismantled everything. You know, so yeah, you know, those are the kinds of things that you know, that get me going, as I say. But more often than not, I'll assess it from a perspective of, you know, there's no value to be added here. Just turn away and walk away from it. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Ivan. And maybe because I also know you a little bit, I was also thinking about the story of you taking over the chairmanship of Unity College. We've got a little bit of time. Do you mind telling that story?
No, not at all. So yeah, yeah, my oldest daughter was born with Down syndrome, and you know, we in the early years we really grappled with, you know, what was the right route to take with her from an educational perspective, and went through a lot of different scenarios, and eventually came across this particular school called Unity College, which was a school specifically focused on on learners with special needs educational requirements across the board. So, from Downs to autism to, all sorts of, conditions that I'd never heard of until I actually got involved there. Things like Fragile X and a lot of different interesting conditions. And, the really interesting thing was that the day we took Gail there, on her first visit, not to start school, but to assess whether we were going to take her there. She disengaged from us and just went into the environment and just seemed completely at home. So, for us, the decision was basically made on that basis. But in her first sort of 2 years there, we were looking at it, and we just felt that, enough wasn't being done. It was basically being run as an expensive babysitting environment, and from the research and the input and the things we've done, we knew that early intervention was absolutely key, and could produce some amazing results. I mean, one doesn't expect doctors and lawyers to come out of an environment like that, but happy, functional individuals that can operate in mainstream society is certainly a goal that can be achieved. And I think it was in 1999, one of the board members, approached me and said, would you be prepared to join the board? And I said to him, no, not unless you make me chairman, because I'm not happy with the way things are being done. I'm not going to serve under the current chairman because I believe he's allowed things to drift along and disintegrate. And so, I'll join, but, find out whether people will be prepared to accept me as chairperson, and then I'll do it. And they came back to me and said, we'll definitely support you. The existing chairman does need to step down. He's been on the job for 10 years. But you'll have to come in on the first year, but we'll make you vice chairman for the first year. So I said, all right, take it on that basis. And so I went on then, and I wound up being on that board for 8 years. With the help of some amazing staff members and teachers and all the rest of it, we actually turned that into a school that really provided, I believe, quality education and facilities and an environment for these young kids. So that was, thanks, Lee. That was a story where I suppose I did stand up for, but it came back to one of my fundamental values, my family, and I think that's where that really came from. And yes, it benefited others, which is great, but the motivator, and I think Trevor will probably have some of the things that motivate us is the family for me, certainly to kick off with. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ivan. I love that story. I think it's so powerful. Definitely illustrates the point. Trevor, your perspective on, I know you never stick your neck out for anything, and you're not prepared to take the heat for most things. But given your limited experience, could you just share your thoughts on the topic, please?
Well, I've got my crash helmet on here, and you can see I was trying to push Ed there and give him a bit of flak at the top, but he didn't respond. So it's really unrewarding trying to push people who are just like jelly and don't come back at you. So I'm probably, I think I came on board and I heard him talking about being sandwiched in the middle of two Afrikaners. And I wondered if that story was being broadcast. So I didn't know whether he was saying that we're just made of bread, or he's the patty in the middle, the vegan patty, or whatever. Can I keep pushing, Ed? When are you going to explode, man? Right. So this thing, this discussion you're talking about, taking the heat, for us at Wisdoms, we talk of stand up and be counted. There does come a time in your life when you are confronted by situations of people who do not seem to have the same thinking or opinion that you have, and for some reason you see that this will take away from society rather than add positive value to society. And I think that always has my hackles rising. So I'm unlike Ivan. I come out of the bush. My hackles rise easily when I see bullies. And in fact, I had a profile done on myself. Some guy did a profile on me to find out what it is that made me tick. He was trying to understand who this guy was, what does he do, how does he operate. And it turned out that I'm a martyr, for goodness sake. That if I find other individuals are being bullied for some odd reason, I'll actually stand up and take their side. So, and I think if I look back on my life, man, I've been involved in many a scrap where it has been a group of bullies taking on individuals who actually can't stand up for themselves, or they needed a little bit of help, and stood in. So that's where all the scars and bruises and all that come from, because I'm not the biggest Afrikaner boy on either side of the bun. But they do say sometimes watch out for small packages, because you never know what gets set off inside those things. The meme that I'm interested in at the moment is what goes on in the minds of people that did things like the event of Trump on that day, January the 6th of 2021 at the state capitol in Washington. That there were many, many people there. If you had to go and interrogate them, they'd all say they were standing up to be counted for what they believed in. And what they were doing was breaking down windows, threatening to hang people and do all of these sort of things. There's a fine line, and I think Sven talked about it. There's some sort of responsibility or consequence that does arise as a result of standing up and taking the heat. And anyone who does that has got to be aware of the positives and the negatives of what you're actually doing. And that's where I like to come back to a couple of things. And in fact, it falls in line with a little meme and video meme that I posted to our Wisdom site this morning is somewhere along the line, you've got to respect yourself first and foremost. And the more you respect who you are, the positions you stand for, how you are counted, and the fact that you look in life to make a positive contribution to society instead of ripping society off or taking away from society, the more you can respect others' right to their opinion if they work on exactly the same basis, that what they are doing is looking to add value to society. But if they're intent on ripping you off, or let's go and hang these people and murder them, or let's break down the windows, that's a line that they've crossed that doesn't gel with me. So I think it's quite an important meme that when you're prepared to take up the heat, are you taking up the heat because some guy put out a whole lot of misinformation? And many of these people don't think it was misinformation. They actually bought into this. But do you have the ability to actually assess the information around you, and you're able to identify that if for what you are standing up, if there are people around you and they are killing people and looting and stealing, maybe that's just not the type of thing you want to take the heat for. Look, in that case, you might take the heat in a cold cell for 10 to 15 years because you're going down the wrong route. So I hope that makes a contribution.
always a contribution, Trevor. Never in doubt about that. So thank you. I think, yeah, also, you know, just gives pause for thought. It's not a new subject, but it's certainly, as you say, you kind of then, when you look at yourself and you think, okay, so what am I prepared to stand up for? What am I prepared to take the heat for? What have I? Have I actually made, because I am much more predisposed to be concerned about what other people think. Certainly in the past, I've got thicker and thicker skin as my years have been added. And maybe working with Trevor, he's smiling, so that definitely has contributed. But I do think about myself as a young person, is that I wasn't just a meek and mild, just do what you're told kind of person either. There were things that I was prepared to stand up for, and a certain level of injustice or standing up for the underdog was something that I just reacted to automatically. And so some of the seniors at school and some of their initiation practices and those kinds of things, I stood up to those things. And one of the things I'm proud of is that when I was a senior at high school, I stopped those initiation practices. They didn't happen in my year. Whether it continued after that, I don't know. But I had enough power and I had enough gumption to say, not on my watch. A simple thing, but one of the things that, and I don't see maybe enough parents doing it, I would always tell my kids, if they got themselves into a difficult situation and they wanted to get out of it, they could always blame me. They could always say, oh, my mom is terrible. She's a dragon. You know, she won't allow me to do that. There's no ways, I would be killed, knowing full well that they wouldn't. But I always say to them, make me the big bad wolf. So I didn't care what my daughter's friends thought of me. And that might seem like a simple thing, but that was just one other thing. I've got a little list here that I'm working through.
Well, that's why we made you CEO, Lee. So yeah, you're the big bad wolf of wisdom. So we.
And then there's two other things that I wanted to say. And a simple thing happened this week. We have a WhatsApp group for my cousins. Now, I have cousins. I have lots of cousins, and they are spread all over the world. And fairly recently, we've put this, and I'm like within the last year or two, put this WhatsApp group together. I'm one of the youngest in the group. And one of my aunts put onto the group this week a political image stating something about Trump and all the rest of it. And I actually don't mind what she thinks, that's not the issue. But to post it on our WhatsApp group seemed to me a violation of what the group was about. And I waited for about an hour. Normally people would respond to a post fairly quickly, but no, there was silence. And I put something on the group saying, can we please keep this group to family news and conversations only? And it was just a simple thing, but just trying to create some boundaries around what I believe is good. And I did get a message from one of my aunts saying, bravo, Lee. So I felt that was a good comment. And then we had this conversation in Wisdom's Chats before, and so what would you stand up for? And I did a whole diatribe on vaccines and how I am pro-vaccine, and anybody that wants to, my children have been saved by vaccines. The world has been saved from terrible diseases because of vaccines. And so I will stand up for being vaccinated, especially in the light of COVID now and all the rest of it. And I still stand by that. But since then, I have had new information about a medication called ivermectin. And And it's made me think, yes, we still do need to be vaccinated, but if there are alternatives or options, then we mustn't be blinded by these big business and big government controlling who we are and what we think. So I've had to think about that one. And as I say, I would still choose to be vaccinated and still stand for that. But it just made me think that we can stand for something and then find new information that needs us to evaluate what we're standing up for. So those are my thoughts. And so if I'm thinking about tomorrow, and what tomorrow, and not tomorrow, next week. So next week, Tuesday, 8 o'clock UK time. Edward spoke about, and Sven, each of us, and has actually spoken about what is true for me? What is true? How do I remain true to myself? But I want to throw into the mix here, because we've sort of touched on the subject, being true to ourselves. But is there a place where being true to ourselves is selfish? That's the sort of question. I want to just make it a little bit more difficult for us to answer that question. So is being true to ourselves an act of selfishness? That's what I want for us to talk about next week. Trevor, did you want to add something?
Yeah, there's a realization as you were talking over the segment where you turn around and say, since you've known me, you've got tougher and tougher. I suppose that's only over the time that you've known me, but since I've known you, I've got softer and softer. So I'd like my toughness back, please, and you can have your softy side back. Just WhatsApp it to me if you can.
I've always thought Trevor was a little softy.
Me too.
I think it's a fair exchange.
Ever since he became a grandmother.
Yep.
A mum.
Us women stick together, that's for certain.
Sven, Edward, Ivan, Trevor, thank you. Great to have you with us. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Speak soon.